Peace and blessings, peace and blessings. As we come out of Thanksgiving holiday, I hope everybody was safe, spent a lot of time with as much family and friends and people that you love and care about as you can. Because that ultimately should be what it's about, not just consumerism and gluttony, even though I busted a gut. Shout out to everybody that fed me yesterday. But I'm blessed that yesterday I had a really good moment with my son and helping us both, because we're both being transformed in this time, and helping us to both have a greater appreciation for our ancestry and the people that came before us. Because if you just go back in the most recent history, I'm only here because a couple of my ancestors were able to survive the transatlantic slave trade, that they were able to make it across the Middle Passage, that some of my ancestors were able to survive slavery. My grandmother was able to survive the Great Depression, and then she was able to survive the Black Codes and Jim Crow, so that my mother could be born out of Jim Crow and into the Civil Rights era, right? And then had to survive. My mother had to survive the 60 hippie eras and the Nixon era of the 70s, and then into the Reagan crack era. And then I had to survive the 80s and the 90s of gangbanging and all of these different things, the prison industrial complex and truth and sentencing, so that my son could be born. So, and that's just most recent history. You can go back even many more thousands of years. Nobody stands here today because of their own efforts. You're only here because someone in your lineage had to survive some really crazy events and times. You know, you probably have just as good a chance of being struck by lightning twice in the same place on the same day as you do your lineage or your bloodline extending past 10 generations, because it's a lot of things that have to culminate and have to happen or transpire in order for that to happen. So just because of that, you have to have a greater appreciation for all of those that came before you. And the sacrifices and the surviving techniques or tactics that they had to utilize to survive, because it's crazy, but the world didn't always look like this, and people didn't always live in houses and apartments and townhouses and condos, tents and yurts. But at some point in time, people had to live and survive under the elements. So I had to help my son and myself understand that everything from the clothes that I wear, the technology that we utilize, to the food that we consume, the house that we live in, the roads that we drive on, everything. It's a lot of hands that had to be involved just to make a hoodie. And we're not just talking about the actual stitching of it, but somebody had a thought that had to make a way for it to conceptualize, to materialize, and then actually be utilized. From a watch to a phone to a house to a car, like all of these things throughout time, many people played a significant part or role in all of these things coming to fruition so that we can use them freely and not even think about it. Every single time I put a key into a lock and I turn it, I don't ever think about the people who made that key and made that lock, or the inventor, or the person who had an idea, or the person who made the door so that the lock could be installed into the door. Like, there's so many things that we kind of take it for granted. And I think that it isn't until we get a little bit closer to God and we can look at it, what it looked like before man decided that they could do it better than God could, that you can actually have a true appreciation. Because this is the end product, but it all starts. Everything that we utilize or consume can always be traced back to the earth. And the last time I checked, man didn't create earth, he only destroyed it. So having a greater appreciation for all of the people that came before me always ultimately extends back to God. But it's just helping to have a greater sense of appreciation. You can't have more or grow unless you take into account how you got here. So again, he and I are both being transformed. It's been a great experience to be able to go on this journey with him. And I hope that everybody else has the opportunity to not just be grateful for the big things like, you know, life and air that we breathe, and the house that we live in, the kids that we raise, the car that we drive, the job that we got, the food that we eat. But even go a little bit deeper than that. I hope everybody appreciates the sacrifices and the toil of all of the many people that came before us, not just our parents and our grandparents, but many, many, many generations beyond that. And not just the people in our own bloodline or our own lineage or our own ancestry, because it always is a collective or a cooperative. in order for us to be able to exist today. And especially in as divisive times that we live in, where everybody's at each other's neck for the differences, how about we take a little bit of time during this season that everybody is so happy and so jolly and so excited to look at it from somebody else's perspective, to try to have an experience that is not our own, but maybe somebody else's, to help us have even that much more of appreciation for what we have and how we got here.